Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Guns and Guitars, and today we are looking at the JOYO Badass Bass Amp. This is JOYO's latest addition to their BanTamP series of amplifiers, and it's a much anticipated and long-awaited bass amp version for those of us that have been requesting a bass version for a really long time. Now, so far, this has gotten some really mixed reviews, and that's, in my opinion, because people are just using it incorrectly. So, we're going to talk about the wrong way to use this, as well as what I feel like is the right way to use this, and go over the features and specs and have some good quality sound demos there at the end. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, stick around. I'm Dan, this is Guns and Guitars. Let's get started. As I mentioned earlier, this is JOYO's latest addition to the BanTamP series of guitar amps, and I think there has been a lot of confusion about this, and one of the ways that people are using it incorrectly. People think that it's a guitar amp. Okay, even though it says BanTamP bass, and where it says badass, it's highlighted bass, I think people have still confused this to be a guitar amp. A lot of the reviews are reviewing it as guitar players, and they're comparing it to the Zombie and the Atomic and the Firebrand and some other guitar versions of the BanTamP series. And the odd thing is that most of those reviews are actually very favorable. People really like this thing for guitar, but a lot of the guitar players have complained that it's not boosting the right frequencies and stuff, and that's because they're using it wrong. Okay, this is not a guitar amp, this is a bass amp, and it's something that we bass players have been requesting for a long time because the BanTamP series has been really well received. Lots of people collect them. These little lunchbox style hybrid amps, they just sound so good. And so this is really no exception. And probably my favorite piece of bass gear that I have reviewed in the last year. Probably has even taken first place over the Sonic Cake Boom Avenue. If you haven't seen that review, you should check out my video on that. But this thing is seriously cool, okay? Like JOYO's other BanTamP series, it is a hybrid amp. So there is a real tube gain stage in here, a single 12AX7 preamp tube that gives you real natural tube gain that just sounds incredible. And then it's backed by a 50-watt solid-state power amp to amplify it into usable tone, which is, I believe, actually double what they give guitar amps. I think they give the guitar amp versions 25 watts of solid-state power. I'll have to double-check that. Okay, after double-checking, it's actually only 20 watts that JOYO puts in the BanTamP guitar amps. And while they've only ever advertised them as being like practice amps, some people have found that they can actually get a giggable volume out of the guitar amps, and so it's become like a staple amongst small venue musicians. And I think that's another reason why this badass has gotten mixed reviews, is that while JOYO only ever advertised it as a practice amp, people have been trying to gig with it, and even by nearly tripling the wattage to 50 watts, this thing just can't quite keep up with a loud drummer. And so if that's what you're using it for, if you're trying to hook it up to a big monster stack and keep up with a real band, again, you're using it wrong. That's not its intended purpose, okay? If you're just plugging it into a small speaker cab for bedroom practice, then that is a way to use it. I don't think it's the best way to use it, but it certainly works for that. And at bedroom levels, it even gets a little bit too loud, we'll call it living room levels. And it cranks out a ton of low end, it cranks out really great tone, and like I said, that's one of the right ways to use it. I just think that there's a better way, which we'll get into a little bit later. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the specs here, okay? We've got a 3-band EQ with low, mids, and highs, and then we have the gain stage and your master output. So crank up the gain if you want to get a little bit of overdrive. I'll demonstrate that for you a little bit later. And then there's also a built-in compressor, and this is fantastic. As a bass player, that's what we want, is compression. Let's smooth out our playing. Let's help us to sit and fill in that low end as much as possible. My first and probably only criticism of this amp is that they've included a foot switch to activate the compressor, or you can activate it via this switch right here. For the life of me, I just can't figure out a good use for this, especially since there's no adjustments to the compression settings on the foot switch. You have to come back to your amp to change your compression settings anyway, so you might as well turn it on and off. The compression pedal is just not for me. The compression, however, does sound really good, and again, I will demonstrate that for you here in a little bit. Like the other BanTamP series, they do have the Bluetooth on and off, so if you want to use this to bump up some jams, or practice along with your, church music or whatever, that's an excellent feature to have the Bluetooth auxiliary use for. And then on the back, just like all your other BanTamPs, you have your send and return for your effects loop, you got your headphones output, and then you've got a speaker output for down to a 4 ohm speaker load. And that's pretty much it as far as specs. So you guys might be dying to know, how do I feel is the right way to use this amp? And in my opinion, the best way to use this amp is as a tube preamp. You can probably ignore this speaker stack that it's sitting on because I'm not even plugged into it. I'm really only using it as a platform to get this thing by my head while I review it so you can see it. But what I'm actually doing is I'm recording directly from the headphone output into my recording interface, and you will be able to hear in this sound demo how much it thickens and fattens up the tone, okay? So what I'm doing here, just so you guys know, I'm going direct into a direct box, and then I'm taking the XLR output of the direct box into input 1 of my recording interface. Then I'm taking the 1/4 inch output of the direct box, going into the JOYO Badass, and then I'm taking the headphone out of that into input 2 of the recording interface. So I'm recording simultaneously just 1, the direct signal from this bass, and 2, the direct signal from this BanTamP. And I'll just do an A-B comparison as I'm demoing so you can hear the difference. So for this first sound demo, just leaving the EQ completely flat, I have the gain turned down so you won't hear any overdrive, and I have the compression off. And even just setting this as bland as it is, you can see how much it just thickens up and colors the tone and gives it that awesome vintage tube tone. For this next demo, we're going to be using a pick, and we're going to crank up the mids, and we'll back off the highs a little bit, and we're going to crank up the gain and turn down the master a little bit, and we'll just see what kind of cool sort of hard rock pick overdrive tones we can get out of this thing. I know you guys are dying to hear, can this thing slap? So for the slap setting, we're going to push the mids all the way down, scoop out those mids. We're going to crank up the bass quite a bit, and we're going to crank up the highs just a tad. If you push the highs a little bit too hard, it gets a little bit too harsh, in my opinion. And then we're going to turn on the compression, crank that up a little bit, turn the gain back down, and volume back up. All right, here we go. First try. So that should give you a pretty good idea of the various tones that you can get out of this thing. And if you can't tell, I'm absolutely in love with it. In fact, I'm probably going to be using this as a preamp to record all of my bass demos from here on out on the channel, at least until I find something better. And I know that at this price range, you can get a solid state amp from other brands that can actually gig with a full band. I know that I think TC Electronics, Gallion Kruger, maybe Behringer, and a few others make a 200 watt, micro bass amplifier that is loud enough to gig and has, a headphone output for bedroom practice and stuff like that. But what those amps don't have is the 12AX7 tube preamp stage, and that's what makes this thing so special. And yes, you can plug it into a speaker and practice in your bedroom with it, but like I said, I think its best use is as a tube preamp for home recording or in studio recording or live with a PA. And that's actually probably my only other criticism for this thing, is that I wish they would ditch the effects loop in favor of a XLR output so that you could go directly into a house PA. Okay, obviously it doesn't matter since I have 1/4 inch inputs on my what is that, Focusrite Scarlett USB interface, so no problems there. But otherwise, you would have to go through a direct box to go into a house PA system. And so I wish there was a XLR direct output. But overall, I think JOYO really knocked it out of the park here when they decided to offer us a real tube hybrid bass amp at a price we can actually afford. So let me know in the comments if you agree. And if you're new to the channel and you're wondering what the heck bass I am playing, and you're probably thinking, it sounds amazing. Well, this is my own design, and you can actually watch me build it in a short playlist over there. And there's information in there about how you could order one for yourself down the road if you would like it. I'm Dan, this is Guns and Guitars, and I'll see you in those videos.